Hey everyone, this is Alex here from ninjateacher.com, out here in beautiful Vietnam, and I'm joined here by Idausa from the mimicmethod.com, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about language learning. So let me just quickly introduce Idausa from what I know about him. Very cool guy who I met out here in Vietnam, and he is great with languages, so that's why I wanted to chat to him, get some advice about language learning and how you guys can apply it to your own language learning. So, Idausa, would you mind just introducing yourself to everyone and telling us a little bit about yourself and your experiences with language learning?
With pleasure. So my name's Idausa Ness, and I'm from the US, where I spoke English my whole life, or up until I was like 17, 18. And then I learned Spanish, and I found that language came a bit more naturally to me than it was for other people. So I decided to learn Chinese when I got to university, then Portuguese after I graduated. I went to Brazil, and then from there I learned, from there I started a business called the Mimic Method, and I had a few epiphanies here and there about how other people can learn languages faster. Started that business and learned French. This year I learned German. So in total I speak 6 languages, and we have courses in 6 and counting languages.
Wow, that's amazing, man. Really, really cool. Especially considering I have never been a big second language person myself. I've also only spoken English growing up, and I've attempted to learn a couple of languages. So if you check out the videos I've done recently on this, I just made a couple of videos about how I'm starting to learn Vietnamese, because I haven't learned a language before that, at least to a level where I'm happy with that. So what I wanted to ask you and get some insights about is let's quickly go into what your method of learning is, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what I've tried, and then see if you have a plan of action for me. So could you tell us a little bit about the Mimic Method and what you recommend for people learning languages?
Sure, so my language philosophy is called the Mimic Method because no matter how you spin it, no matter what program you're doing, ultimately, to learn a language, you have to mimic the people with whom you wish to communicate. So here in Vietnam, when I say I want to learn Vietnamese, what I'm really trying to say is that I would very much like to communicate with the Vietnamese people. I like them, they're very friendly. And therefore, I need to mimic the sounds that they make when they move their mouth and communicate with one another. So the Mimic Method. Now that being the case, since it's all based on sound, the very first thing that I do, or that we do in our program, is I learn the sounds of that language. So once again, in the case of Vietnamese, if I were to learn it, which I will do at some point, not right now, is I would break down all the sounds and then teach my ear to hear those sounds, because my ear can't hear them initially. Then I would teach my mouth, develop the motor skills, kind of like, when you're learning to dance, like if your tongue was your feet, teaching your tongue how to dance in Vietnamese, so I can mimic these sounds. And then that becomes a foundation from which I learn to speak and understand. So it's the same technique, same philosophy for all languages. So for example, this year for German, the very first thing I did was I learned every single German sound, how to hear it, how to pronounce it in every context. And I developed the ability to hear German. Someone's like, ich möchte etwas essen. And I'm like, ich möchte etwas essen. And then once I was able to make those sounds, once I ask, hey, what does that mean? Then he says, oh, that means I would like to eat. I haven't eaten today, so I'm really hungry. I'm thinking about food a lot. Anyways, yeah. So once I have the ability to hear the sound, then I can find out what it means. And yeah, so what makes us different is basically we switch that equation. Most people focus on accent, pronunciation last, and they think it's like a bonus skill, and they say, oh, let me read and write first. Then they get to a stage where they can't understand people, even though they can read. They can't speak very well, even though they can write. And it kind of defeats the whole purpose, because at the end of the day, I didn't come here to write letters to Vietnamese people. I want to make friends, connections, and we do that as we're doing right now through speaking.
Awesome. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and actually the video that I made previously on how I was going to go about learning Vietnamese actually said, a similar thing. Just from what I figured out, is the fact that it's really important to be able to say the sounds and do the sounds properly. Especially in a language like Vietnamese where it's tonal, right? And it goes up and down, and if you don't get those tones right, Vietnamese people won't understand you at all. So I'm glad you said that, firstly. And also I do want to say that it really works, like the way you do things. And if you guys haven't seen any of Dallas's stuff, check out his video on rapping in, I don't know, 6 languages or 8 languages or something like that. Really cool. And apparently, you know, a lot of native speakers of those languages say his pronunciation is perfect. So I really get that, and I do want to be able to speak the language. You know, that's the main thing, communicate with the language. So now what I wanted to ask you a little bit about was the fact that I have been trying to learn languages multiple times, and I've had some success, but you know, I think I haven't been consistent enough about it. So I feel like I've got to a point in my life right now where I can actually, I have the discipline to work hard at something like learning a language. And for me, that's you know, something I built up. So now I know I can apply it to language learning, but I feel like I need a good plan of action. So that's where I'm hoping you can help me out. So things I've tried, and I don't know if you guys have you know, tried many other methods of language learning, but I've tried a few things. Having teachers is good. The one that I found was the most effective for me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it's quite similar to what you do, is the Pimsleur method, which for me has been really good because I made the most progress with that when I was learning Korean. And for me, that just kind of downloaded the information into my head. It was exact, you just had to follow it, you know, and you mimicked it like that. And that actually got me the quickest, best results so far. But now what I'm looking for is, if you guys have seen my other videos, I'm just trying to learn Vietnamese as best I can in 90 days, do as much as I can. So I want to get a plan of action so that I can stick to it and go with it. So what would you recommend for someone who is new to language learning or wants to learn a new language and, you know, wants a plan of action to follow and stick to? Where would you start and how would you progress?
So yeah, first thing is to, when you do any plan of action for anything, is to decide on what is your end goal, really. Because we say, I want to learn French or I want to learn Vietnamese, but what does that actually mean? You know, I have a different level of English than another American speaker might have a higher level of English than me. Is my goal to be a public speaker in Vietnamese, or is my goal to be just to be able to order food at a restaurant, or is my goal to be to make friends in Vietnamese, get a girlfriend or get a boyfriend or whatever, and communicate? So when you start identifying what the goal is, then you can get even deeper and say, what are the contexts that I'm actually going to do? And that's very important because usually when we do these kind of generic kind of learning programs, they teach you things that are really irrelevant, like you know, how to behave at a job interview, or how to order food or how to buy food at a grocery store, right? Stuff like I don't know, I'm not gonna do that. What I want to care about is like talking about myself, speaking about, you know, my business, what I do, why I like to travel, the things I'm passionate about, the music I listen to. So the way I start is, well, first the way I start actually is I get the sounds, but beyond that, what I would do is Pimsleur I also use. I like Pimsleur, and we can get into details why I think Pimsleur is better than all the other programs out there for learning grammar. But beyond that, what I would do is start to like record myself speaking in English about the things that I would typically find myself speaking about in English. So for example, if I came to Vietnamese, I'm like, all right, when I meet people who are new, I say, hi, my name is Idausa, I come from the US, I run a business called the MIM Method, we do language learning, I like to travel a lot, blah, 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 blah. And I'll record myself saying that kind of freestyle. Then what I would do is get that translated or have someone help me get that translated into the language as a kind of baseline comparison. And then once I have these things like Pimsleur, I'd work my way through Pimsleur as quickly as possible. For those who don't know the way Pimsleur works, it's a 30-minute like audio lessons that are pure audio and then just mimicking what the speaker's saying. That gives you the kind of grammar scaffolding you need to know, like basic words and basic structures. And then yeah, I would just practice saying these same English scripts and context, well not scripts, rather English context in Vietnamese to the best of my ability. And then get work with a tutor or work with someone else to help me incrementally improve the eloquence of that. So I'm not sitting here memorizing grammar rules, doing flashcards or anything. I'm just trying to get better at speaking about things that I would normally speak about anyways. And then what happens is you have a kind of multiplier effect where now each time you go out and you speak to people, the same conversation comes up over and over again. Each time you get to practice it. And then each time you go home and study, you're getting better at it and you're reflecting on like, oh, that guy said this, and you're getting better at those conversations. And when you do that with just like, 3 or 4, really not that much, your introduction, what you like to do, it really helps to be aware of what the kind of things you talk about when you go, especially when you travel. And then you do that enough times with those like 4 things, and all of a sudden you find it's a strong acceleration and you have the kind of critical mass you need to branch out to learning other vocabulary and other things. And the final piece of all that is one thing I always do, and you can see this in my videos, my progress videos, is I'm constantly asking, how do I say this? So the first thing I learn how to say in language is, how do I say this? And because I've trained my ear and my mouth, most people, they don't get a lot of benefit from that. You say, how do I say this? They say it and they forget because they need to see it down on paper first. And most people are trained by the other programs to be addicted to writing. But if you train your ear and you train your auditory memory, when someone says, how do I say this? And they say, this is, whatever this guy's saying. When someone says that, then you just repeat it and you say, and maybe you forget it the next time, but you ask again. And then the third time you remember, and then that context is like, oh, now I know the word for, would you guys like to buy some pho? Whatever that guy was saying, I don't know. Anyway, so that's how it goes. I try not to get too complex. I'm very straightforward. I get complex at the base level of like learning pronunciation. From there, I just speak as much as possible, listen as much as possible, and mimic.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice there. It makes a lot of sense to me, everything you said, and just from a practical standpoint, like that's what you need to do is you need to talk the language, you need to practice the pronunciation, you need to sound like the local sound. So it absolutely makes sense. That really clarifies things for me, so thanks a lot. We've got a bunch of Korean tourists around here, so I could practice my Korean right now. But yeah, so thanks a lot, man. That was really useful. Just one other quick thing I wanted to ask you. What do you do in terms of memorization for words? Do you have any techniques for that?
Yeah, so I actually don't do anything. I don't do any kind of apps or vocabulary flashcards. Once again, I focus on the fundamentals of my ear and like the core auditory memory for that language. And then memory. So for example, when I speak English right now and I want to say the word like tripod, it's not so much that I'm like recalling some things I saw on some flashcards. It's just that I've been around tripods enough times in my life in English, and maybe when I was a baby I was like, what's that called? And they're like, it's a tripod. And I forgot the next time I was like, what's that called again? Tripod. And then eventually I'm around tripods enough that I just make the association. So that's what happens. A lot of people memorize words through these applications, but you don't truly have it memorized or internalized until you use it in conversation. So then the real memorization process is bringing it up organically in the conversation. So that's why I don't really bother with like the artificial sense of word memorization. I do the Pimsleur and get the things, get my basics so I can carry myself in a conversation, and then I get that constant reinforcement in conversation. But once again, it's all based on whether or not my ears are cleaned out and my mouth is loosened up so I can make that connection automatically without having to see it written down on paper.
All right, great stuff. Thank you so much, Adalsa. That was really useful. I hope you guys found that useful. Let us know what you guys are doing in terms of language learning, what techniques you use. If you're planning to learn a new language or you're busy learning one, give us an update in the comments below. Make sure to head over to mimicmethod.com and check out Adalsa's stuff. He has very cool things with rapping and rhyming to learn the language. Definitely check it out. And if you want to come over to South Korea, Vietnam, China, Thailand and teach English, head over to my site ninjateacher.com for jobs, and we can help you find something to get started living out here. So thanks so much, Idalsa, and see you guys again soon. Peace.